You know, I'm right. Nick Durst here with Joe Calabrese and Joe. The wrestling world is on fire right now, so we've got the perfect guest. This guy may be perhaps the smartest guest we've ever had on the show. A graduate from Boston College with his bachelor's degree, and Harvard with his master's degree.
Yeah, he's currently writing for Sports Illustrated. He's previously written places like Yahoo and Fox Sports. Really accomplished, like you said. And we are coming off possibly perhaps the best weekend in pro wrestling in years. So we're really excited to have him on. We get to talk a lot of fun stuff today. Justin Barrasso. Justin, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Hey, gentlemen, you guys did your homework. I love the BC introduction. So that never happens. So thank you very much. And yeah, I'm excited. I mean, what a week. I'm not sure there could be a bigger one, right? With crowds back, with Punk on Friday, with Summerslam rarely on a rare Saturday, with NXT Samoa Joe on Sunday. Yeah, huge. So I'm excited to get into it with you guys. Thank you again.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to talk wrestling, of course. But first, we want to know about you a little bit here. Growing up, were you a sports fan? Obviously, it seems like you were a wrestling fan. And when did you make that decision that perhaps you wanted to pursue a career in sports journalism?
Yeah, great question. I started off growing up outside of Boston and loving the local teams. Like I was lucky. My father had tickets. I was born in '83, but he got tickets in '78. So kind of like the beginning of the Bird era. He was able to find great season tickets. And when I was old enough, we'd go on Friday nights together. So to kind of catch the tail end of Bird, McHale, Parrish, a little bit of Dennis Johnson, Danny Ainge, and then Reggie Lewis and Brian Shaw was exciting. I loved D-Brown as a kid. So I love the Celtics. Always loved basketball. Played and coached for a long time. Baseball too. The Sox weren't great during those early years. I loved as a kid, like Cal Ripken, what he stood for. It just seemed bigger than the game, even though I was in middle school and he was beating the Lou Gehrig streak. And then, yeah, always loved wrestling. Always, it's funny looking through stuff with and there was a picture of my grandparents and I'm in a Ric Flair magazine. So always loved the WWF as a kid and pro wrestling in general. My brother spent too much time watching. So yeah, it was nice to be able to do something with it. I remember in grad school, there were like, it was an equal split on, I shouldn't say that, it was probably 90-10 professors that said, wrestling's good for a story or two. And there was maybe one professor who said, I love the idea, like cover something that isn't being covered. Even the long form journalism for wrestling in the last 10 years has changed dramatically. So it's been so much fun to be a part of that, to do something hopefully a little bit different and unique with the Sports Illustrated brand behind us. And yeah, it's been so much fun to cover pro wrestling. I always knew I wanted to cover sports. I didn't know for sure if it was going to be. I was with Boston Herald, covered the Bruins in their cup run when they lost in 2013, covered the Red Sox, but I never knew for sure it would be wrestling. It's been such a privilege to cover the business and this history. And yeah, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else.
Yeah, it's interesting. The last 20 years, we've gone from newsletters to magazines like Pro Wrestling Illustrated, and now everything is digital. And you've gotten to be behind that, which is awesome. So at the top, Nick mentioned where you went to school. So I'm going to ask, what was your first job coming out of school? And what was the job that kind of took you on the career trajectory that you ended up being on?
I'll tell you, as a junior in college, I still remember the moment. I remember the friend, the senior, when I was a junior, and we were in the Dust Bowl, and she came running toward me. And her name was Angela. And I remember her saying that the Red Sox were doing these internships. This is '03. The year they lose, if you know the Sox, they lose in a terrible Game 7 of the Yankees. Aaron Boone hits the home run. Terrible. But that team was, in my opinion, I'll go to the grave, say this, that team was more lovable in some ways than the '04 team, because the '04 team was 500 through June, and they caught fire and won the World Series, won the wild card, won the World Series. But that team in '03 was, and it still had Nomar, and that team was lovable in a different way. So I remember her saying, there were these internships at Fenway, and I ended up, fortunately enough, I didn't get the internship. So I thought they could add one more spot in, and it turned out somebody backed out, and I was able to get in. And there was a connection there through James Stewart. I don't know if you guys know James, but James is big in the Boston sports, but radio, national radio too, in terms of his work as a producer for Felger and Maz. And he's a passionate, dedicated, intelligent person who covers wrestling as well. So James was pivotal to me getting that internship. And, starting at Fenway, making contacts, that was '03. remember meeting Tom Ducci, and kind of what you guys did to me. I remember saying to him, Seton Hall Prep, because I had a roommate who went to Seton Hall Prep and played baseball there, and that's where Tom. And Tom just looked at me like I had three heads, you know. So, but I was so enamored with his work at Sports Illustrated. So I think when I started at Fenway in 03, I knew that I didn't want to be anywhere else. When I graduated from college, I stayed in sports, and I've never left. So, and I consider pro wrestling part of that sports world too. I know it's sports entertainment. It's a little unique, but I mean, I love I'm getting off track, but like it's been such a viral moment, the gentleman crying in the crowd. This is supposed to go with your emotions. Like that's what this is, right? Like, I don't see why that's such a big deal. The guy felt it, right? I mean, I love that. To me, it makes pro wrestling so special. But yeah, once I got a taste of the sports world, working in it, I never wanted to leave.
Yeah, so quickly, since you mentioned Verducci and wanting to be at Sports Illustrated, you went from, I believe, Yahoo to Sports Illustrated.
I never actually wrote. So Yahoo and Fox, maybe I think they've just run my stuff.
Right.
Work directly for. So I was at the Boston Herald, and I never wanted to leave Herald in Boston. I love the idea of local news. Like, don't get it anywhere else. Even before that, other local publications. I know the Boston Herald's a little bit bigger, and it's politically, I don't align that direction. But I love the Herald because Killer Kowalski used to write a Saturday column when I was a kid. And I used to love that. Like, some weeks it was like a blurb, but some weeks it wouldn't run. I'd be devastated, right? I'd love to get the ink on my fingers, and that's so connecting wrestling to the Herald. And we reached the point, unfortunately, with wrestling at least, where they just didn't want the sports editor was amazing. He retired, Hank Hernowitz, and he's made so many careers. He retired, and the new sports editor said that wrestling wasn't his focus point. Good luck. And so, I mean, I could have complained, or I moved forward. So Sports Illustrated, I ended up making a contact there. We ran the Bret Hart piece through Andy Gray, who's a huge mentor for me and someone who's been pivotal to my career trajectory. And we ran the Bret Hart piece, and it was about the screw job. I think we ran that in 2013, and that was one of the top 25 most read pieces of the year. And they brought me back for another piece and another piece and another piece. And then Andy said, why don't we do a Wednesday column for SI? And now in August 24th, 2021, here we are, still going. So yeah, it's been a fun ride.
Yeah, and you're just cranking out the articles. It seems like you're doing a bunch a week. And how did you also start picking up some MMA stuff?
Sometimes I think it's too many every day. Let pieces breathe, but I'm doing the opposite of. While during the pandemic, we were running every day, which again, I don't know if is the best thing, but for the people who read them, the internet's the Wild West. People are clicking and reading and agreeing or disagreeing or digesting. I'm so grateful. And I loved MMA too. I got into MMA through Ken Shamrock, where I would rent like all of those VHS tapes. It looks so violent, but kind of under the premise it was the same as wrestling, even though it wasn't. But that was how I, kind of developed a love for MMA. And I think the two sports or the two fields, two industries connect. They're both underpaid. They're both underappreciated. It takes a tremendous amount of work to succeed in either. So I think there's a lot of connective tissue between pro wrestling and pro fighting, even though there are two very different worlds.
Yeah, no doubt about it. You got started with Ken Shamrock, people going back and forth between the industries and being megastars all over. So we'll talk about a former UFC star.
Nick, can I say real quick?
Yeah.
I never understood Dan Severn when he came in. Like being a pro wrestling guy, I just didn't get the appeal.
Yeah.
Shamrock I got right away. Shamrock's pivotal at Austin Hart match at Mania. Like, plays a huge role. I'm a huge Shamrock fan. You look at him, he just drips intensity. Dan Severn, I'm like, you kidding me? This guy, it was so dull in pro wrestling at the time, I thought. And then you watch his MMA stuff and it was like, oh my gosh, you wouldn't want to touch this guy, right? So it was such a wake-up call for a young know-it-all, kid. We all know it all, right? So, but it was so cool to see a different side of Dan in the octagon or in the cage. He's a different. So yeah, that was kind of my introduction to Ken. So pro wrestling was my introduction to MMA a long time ago.
Yeah, how could you forget? Those angles back then. It was like,
yeah,
what is this? And I don't know where UFC would be without Ken Shamrock, honestly. But let's talk a little wrestling here. AEW Rampage. Of course, it's all about CM Punk's return. It seems like he wants to be there, but what do you think? If he had it his way, would he still be in UFC and not, coming back to wrestling. There's some, we got to stay off the IWC here. Their chief people are saying, oh, well, maybe he's broke. He just has come back and needs money, or, maybe he need, all this nonsense. Why do you ultimately think CM Punk made his decision to return to wrestling?
I don't believe anything other than it's his passion. I don't believe if Phil Brooks didn't want to do this, I don't get a look at his bank accounts, but I firmly believe that if Phil Brooks did not want to do this, he hasn't for the last 7 years, he would not be doing this. He would still be doing some broadcasting in MMA, acting opportunities when they appear. MMA, I think he realized, especially in the UFC, it's top tier talent. He was over his head, but the fact that he did is still pretty remarkable. I think that Phil or Punk wants to do this because he's passionate about it, and he's been consistent ever since Nicky said that he wanted to, quote unquote, retire. Over the years, he said he'd come back if you gave him the right story. And clearly, I think the right story in WWE was come back. That's not what he wanted, right? He wanted something that he could really sink his teeth into. And let's be honest, I love the trajectory that he would, the narrative he was presenting, that interview, that in-ring interview on Rampage, about how he left pro wrestling when he left Ring of Honor and now he's back. It's a tailor-made story. It would have been unique had he gone back to WWE, because it ended on such terrible terms. Like the terminating his contract on his wedding day. And you always laugh at the Vince interview on the Austin Network special when he said that was a mistake. You don't make those kind of mistakes. I mean, that was obviously done for a reason. I thought it was surprising he came back to Fox to the studio show with Backstage.
Yep.
But I think he's built to do something away from WWE. He's still passionate. I know during the call he said he'd probably get criticized for it. He said he hasn't been doing anything different with his wrestling training. I think he's going to be sensational, and he's working with guys, or starting off with a guy like Darby Allin. Of course he's going to look great. Of course he will. Punk won't put himself in a position where he's not going to succeed. He's too good. And I know it's kind of a trite phrase to say restarting a new wrestling war. AEW is for real. They were for real before Punk, and now with Punk, I think they can compete with WWE in the ratings. Not in terms of making money. WWE's, man and Nick Khan, what they're able to do with distribution,
yeah,
paralleled ever in pro wrestling. But I think in terms of ratings, they're only going to get closer and closer with WWE, if not past them.
So the number came out for Rampage on Friday in that 10 to 11 spot. It was, I believe, 1.1 million viewers, which in a Friday 10 to 11 spot is really, really good.
Wow.
Now, Jim Cornette made a really good point. Said that AEW sold out the United Center, which is a 20,000 seat facility, on the rumor that CM Punk would show up. And obviously he ended up doing so. The name power is obviously there. People were foaming at the mouth to see his return. But I want to ask you, there are some other names out there who are rumored to be heading to AEW. There are three that I have off the top of my head. You're probably thinking of the same three. So all kidding aside, a lot of people would say that a lot of talent in WWE was maybe blocked a little bit. Do you see AEW here within the next 6 to 12 months? The second show obviously does help, but do you think they're going to kind of start to run into similar problems to WWE in regard to the influx of talent that they keep signing and bringing in?
It's a good question, because I love the format on Rampage, at least the first 2 weeks, Joe. It's 4 matches or 4 segments, 3 or 4 matches. How much more can you do in an hour, right? Like, I think the shows have been action-packed. They've been really, really good, but it's hard to do much more in that hour. So you're limited on Friday nights. They do have a plethora of talent. I agree. So I think it's going to be hard to stand out, but I don't think there's, I'm going to put this, I don't think it's a different type of barrier in AEW. I think that if you get that crowd reaction, you'll get an opportunity. WWE, there's some more bureaucracy behind it. But you're right, though. Very quietly, AEW's put together a huge roster. And if they had a guy like Adam Cole, which I think is certainly in play, then that's one last top spot. Right? So what happens then? I agree, it's tough, but that's a good thing. Like, the more competition between companies, the better. the more competition within a company, the better too. Look at their women's division. I think it keeps getting more and more competitive. That's great for the fan base. So I'm excited. I do think there is something to that question, but I don't think it's a bad thing. I think that you're not, if you want to be top of the card, you're not going to be handed anything. And I think you look at Kenny Omega, he could have taken an approach where he just asked to be handed the top of the card. Kenny went the long way to become a champion and the face of the promotion. And as champion, Kenny's done something no one else has done ever in wrestling. He's also, representing AEW and AAA in Impact Wrestling. I mean, Kenny's special. So he's not asking to be handed anything. He's going out and taking it. So I think that's the approach they want. So I think the more competition, the better.
Yeah, I just think at a point we're getting to where it's like there's too many WWE guys here, and there's not many homegrown guys given a chance. We'll see. I think they're playing the long game with Wardlow, which is smart. But there's going to be
Man, too.
I just don't think people are probably coming in getting promised things. Look, Andrade probably came in, and Neville, they thought we're going to be top guys. They're going to be feuding towards the bottom here. We'll see if Ric Flair shows up, if that changes things. Andrade's getting a new manager every week. Vicky Chavo, we'll see. So,
yeah,
I don't like the way they're using these older generational people for managing, but I mean, really, what much more can I do sometimes? But if you're gonna have these big guys come in like Archer and Cage and Will Hobbs, and they're not gonna win matches, to me, it's tough to build from there. But we'll see. Like Joe said, it's tough. There's times packed. But if you got like a guy like Daniel Bryan coming in next month, he needs to go, I think, immediately to the title picture. He shouldn't be coming in and saying, I want to have a feud with Adam Page. Like, he should just go for the title. I think he's at that level. Same thing if you have a guy like Braun Strowman come in. I don't know if you've heard where he's going. People saying WWE, but he's this big star. I just think certain people, they got to come in. They got to book them properly. And still, I think the best guy right there is the franchise, Chris Jericho.
Yeah, and I wanted you said so many interesting things there. I love the old guys as managers because to me it's so old school. That's what would happen, right? The Freddie Blassies, the Bobby Heenans, whomever the older stars would manage. So they're kind of going back in time with that, which I like. I think Andrade's a star. We'll see how he's presented in AEW. And I agree, shifting managers doesn't necessarily help. I think the Triple Mania match helped, but how much of it? Already, a week and a half passed? I don't know. So it's going to be interesting. Braun, I think, is a better fit for WWE or New Japan. WWE just worked with Braun so well. I think he'd be great in Japan. I think he'd be different in New Japan. He's quietly a very good wrestler. I know he
is. I mean, his match versus Lesnar a few years ago was tremendous. Let's just hope that he doesn't come to AEW and join the Hardy brand, because he'll get lost in the shuffle with everybody else.
I think Adam's smart. Yeah, I actually think he'll be a guy eventually back in WWE. But I mean, to think of like Braun or whatever you call him versus Ishii, or Braun versus Shingo, or Braun versus Okada, like, it'd be fun matches for New Japan, especially with you see the Will Ospreay now, and Tanahashi was there, and they're going to really try to build that strong brand on Friday nights at Long Beach. So a guy like that too. I mean, New Japan has a lot of money. They can afford top tier talent. They have top tier talent. Hey, well, I think Braun will be a great fit for them. But again, I think eventually he's back in WWE. Another guy too is going to be interesting is Bronson Reed, or Jonah. He's another guy who's fantastic, and I'm shocked he was cut. But I agree, it's tough too when you cut that many talents at once. They're all talented. They're trying for a reason, but you're diluting the free agent pool, right? So it's tough if just one person got cut. Even was it last summer, not this summer, but last summer, Impact Slammiversary had the 7 WWE ex-WWE surprises. Hey, it was well done, but I don't like multiple surprises in one night because it's like a rabbit out of the hat. You show it to me once, we're mystified. You show it to me twice, 3 times, 4 times. I've seen it 4 times now. So I don't know. I'm curious. I think Braun's a big, literally and figuratively, acquisition wherever he goes. I don't see him in AEW though. And I think Andrade, like you mentioned too, Andrade should be a star. I'm glad he lost the match to Kenny, because if he won, where do you go from there? Like I'll contradict that by saying I like Joe's point about putting Brian, or your point, Brian, right in the title picture if he goes to AEW. But I actually think Andrade is a guy who needs that chase. Like the beauty's in the chase. So I don't know. And Brian, hey, Daniel Bryan's a star. If he comes to AEW, no matter where he goes, he's a benefit for them. So it's a fun time to be a wrestling fan, to be covering wrestling, to be watching wrestling, right? So
Yeah.
we're in a position.
But listen, right now it's all about con versus con. Nick Khan is saying he's getting the releases. He's showing no mercy. If he's releasing his former client as an agent, Nan Verk, I mean, I don't think it's just him. It's I think it's collective, but no mercy there. But we had some big returns at SummerSlam. Becky comes back. No one really liked the way she was booked there, but it seems like she's going to be a heel, which maybe that makes sense then. But with Brock, what have you heard? What was this in the works? Did maybe Vince call him up this week and was like, we're going to have you there? And what's the decision to like really have Lesnar just, destroy John Cena after the show, and it wasn't even filmed or anything? Like, where does everything go from here, real quick?
From everything I heard on that was John being John. That was John's kind of swan song. That was John John is such a team player that's making the product look good. He knew he was getting a lot of guys would have rolled out of the ring and you never would have saw him again. Cena was a team player, which I think is a great story. Braun and even Goldberg to a point. I think you follow the money. Looks like I was surprised at SummerSlam that story was continuing, but maybe less so with Saudi coming up and the big paydays out of Saudi. So I think that the timing with Brock connects Saudi. I think the timing with Goldberg sticking around connects to Saudi. So I think that you always want to follow the money in these cases. Lesnar helps. I don't know if it's the right time. Like, it was great at SummerSlam, but you can't have Roman lose. To me, at least till WrestleMania. I don't even think he loses at Mania. I think he goes through because I don't think The Rock's back.
I think this is a waste of a match in Saudi, but that's where the money is. But hey, listen, I've been dying to see Brock Lesnar as a face here. We'll see. Let's just hope that it's not like, Heyman turns on Reigns and then that'd be.
I think that's the long-term plan. It's Heyman and Roman together. I think Brock's short-term back. And Brock's not John. Like, John Cena is a guy who can carry the company. He worked a house show in the summer of 2021. I mean, he doesn't need to do that. Brock's certainly not doing that. And that's just the way it is. Brock's not going to work live events. I'll be curious to see. And Brock can't carry your broadcast like John can. Like, Cena can work the mic. Cena can work multiple. Yeah. Brock does one thing really, really well, and it's not talking. So I'll be curious how he does, like you said, as a babyface without Paul Heyman. Seen Brock Roman multiple times. The roles are switched here, so I'm curious how well they do together. Again, you need Roman to win this thing. So to me, I think there was more optimism with John because you knew how it would end, how it would go. Then I think there's more question marks. Not that it can't be great, but question marks with Brock.
So this has been great. We're gonna have you back. I have one last question for you, and then we'll let you go on your merry way. So I have been watching the product now for the last couple of months, and I think what you said at the beginning, having fans, I think it's made a world of difference. I think instantaneously the quality of these shows has immediately changed. I think the quality of Raw and SmackDown has immediately gone up. There are some people out there who I think have had really strong returns in front of the live crowd. And I want to see if you kind of agree with these couple names and just names that you like or are kind of feeling right now that you think should be on the radar, moving forward here to the end of the year and into next year. Big E was on the pre-show at SummerSlam with Baron Corbin. And I think what they're doing with the Corbin angle is tremendous. I think Big E, obviously, he's going to be a future world champion with now Money in the Bank, but he had 50,000 people cheering for him on the pre-show, which was great. And I think Randy Orton and Riddle, right now, you could argue them maybe the best storyline in the whole company. You kind of see Randy talking to Riddle here and there on TV. You kind of see that they're really, really having a great time with this. So I wanted to get your opinion on those people in particular. And if there's anybody else, especially on the female side of things, who you'd be watching out for here at the end of the year.
They got away from the New Day. Great question. They got away from the Lashley New Day story after he decimated Kofi at Money in the Bank in July. But I love the idea of resuming that once the Goldberg thing's finished. Maybe you get Woods get a rematch or Kofi gets a rematch or something. And then that's how you transition Big E over because Big E Lashley, I think, is a money match. I think Big E's a money champion. I agree with you. He's a guy that benefits from the crowd. It was so interesting to watch after SummerSlam, the special they did on Mania this year. And they really go into detail on how, and he even says it, Cesaro says, this is my moment. They've done very little with him since that Mania moment. They went back to the Seth story. He had Roman, but he was just an opponent for the attraction, if you will. Yeah. Another person you mentioned that's really interesting. Who else did you say that? You said Big E. You piqued my attention. I've already lost my train of thought.
Riddle.
Oh, so that's what I wanted to say. That's the best thing they're doing. Besides Roman, but like you can see on Friday nights, they have a direction and a purpose with Roman. You know where they're going. You don't know how it's going to happen, but he's a featured part of the show. I love the Riddle Orton thing because you can tell me right now in late August, that's the plan for Mania. They have a strong plan and it's going to play out. How many other stars, and they should, Randy Orton should always know in August his Mania opponent, unless certain things happen. By and large, you should have a sketch of where you're going to go. How many other stars do they know? Like too often, that was my issue with the Becky Lynch match at SummerSlam. Great to have her back, but it's just these short-term games.
Does Sasha have COVID? Do we know anything on Sasha?
What's that?
Does Sasha have COVID? What? That's what
I don't even want to speculate because maybe the back.
Where's Kofi? Kofi has COVID too. We haven't seen him, or is he playing off his injury?
I think it's hard to speculate with those things when you don't have the back. But I do think the point being, like we know Orton and Riddle have a plan. It's so good, and they've committed to it. It's perfect. Like this shouldn't be. I'm not saying it's easy, Nick, but it shouldn't be overly complicated. Where like you're scrambling every week. Like build stories. And that's what they've done with Riddle. It's worked really well. They benefit too. They have AJ to work with, right? Who's better than AJ Styles?
Lots and AJ, tremendous.
Yeah, they remind me in a fun way of like I love the technician. I know it's Apple Stars, but they remind me of like the Mania. I think it was 11, which was a lousy Mania, but it was when Owen Hart promised he'd have this big partner against a smoking gun. He had Yokozuna.
Yeah.
That tag team. Like I love the idea of the giant and a technician. It's a fun team. And AJ, just everything he does is captivating. But you want, like if AJ was in AEW, I think he'd look different. He probably wouldn't be in a tag team story, AEW. But hey, I'm excited that the crowd's back. I hope we can continue that direction. And I miss a lot. I love being on with you guys. I would love to come back. So please ask me anytime.
No, of course. We always do last words. We always ask to, for you to share and promote whatever you have for us. I think it was amazing the MMA point that you made before. I always tell people it's very heads and tails, and you get to see that firsthand with all the right to do so. We wish you success with everything. You're doing a tremendous job. We follow writing that you do. And like I said, if there's anything else you would like to share, promote, go right ahead. Thanks again.
Every Wednesday, the Weekend Wrestling on SI.com. At Justin Barrasso on Twitter. Make sure you guys give me the link and I'll make sure to put it in tomorrow's column.
Excellent. All right, Justin, we appreciate it. And we didn't even get to talk about Elias. I hope everyone's going to be walking on Elias real soon because he is the face of the franchise. They named the company after him. But that's going to do it here for this episode of You Know I'm Right. For our very special guest, Justin, and for my coach, Joe, I am Nick. And this has been You Know I'm Right.